Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
This is your captain speaking, John Regan. I'll be sitting in for Vincent. I got a call over the weekend from him, and I was actually kind of surprised that it was Vincent talking to me. Normally for these types of requests, it's Mrs. Finelli. I think Vincent uses her when he really wants to ask a favor, but it's one of those phone calls, hey, John, which typically means, how would you like to host the radio show? It's getting to be practically wintertime, more so by the weather than by the calendar. And when you operate a farm, there's a lot of things you have to do for getting ready for winter. And he was just going through some of the list of the things, and I was worn out just listening to him. So the next few days I'll be sitting in for Vincent. And, oh, John, by the way, I don't have hosts lined up for certain days. So could you take care of that too? And, well, fortunately, I made some wonderful contacts at the Hear the Watchman conference, and I put out some requests, and those came back favorably. If you didn't hear yesterday, I had Coach Dave Dobemeyer on the first hour. That was absolutely great. I had Mike, who's the organizer of Hear the Watchman, talking about how he got involved and all the way through the conference that he's involved with next week in Las Vegas, Deception in the Desert. And that's going to be an interesting trip there too. Mind-wise, much less if you're traveling there. I wish I could go to that. The good news is that they're going to be posting things on YouTube, and I'll try and keep you apprised of that. But if you can make it, it's going to be awesome too. Then Friday, I've got John Robertson coming on talking about Satanic Hollywood. And you might understand that, Hollywood's not exactly the most moral of places, but you probably don't understand just how evil it is. And I think that's an excellent run up to Halloween Monday, where I'm going to have Anthony Patch on. And he has done a lot of research into these quantum computers and CERN, the connection between them, how the location of CERN is no coincidence. And when you start looking at what the scientists are saying, they are really trying to unlock the gates of hell. So couldn't have a better show for Halloween Monday. Before we get started, Vincent wanted me to remind you there's some gun shows this weekend, and you can find these at rkshows.com. They're going to be in Louisville, Kentucky, Knoxville, Tennessee, Colorado Springs, and Lawrenceville, Georgia this weekend on the 29th. So if you're looking to stock up for what may come after the election and you're anywhere near there, might be a good place to go. So it's Wednesday, which means it's Norm Shealy time. And if you'd like to call in with a question for Dr. Shealy, that number is 1-866-582-9933. It's 1-866-582-9933. 9933. And good morning, Dr. Shealy.
Are we having a civil war 2 weeks from today?
It's going to be interesting to wake up after Election Tuesday and see what they say the results are.
Well, I agree, of course, with Trump that the election is rigged, if nothing else, just by the media. But other than that, I think the chances are great that the leftistas will do everything in their power to gain total control.
And it's amazing to me. I've been seeing these photos where, the Trump rallies are just packed. In fact, they're having to turn away thousands of people. And, they're lucky to get a few dozen people with Hillary or Kane. And the ones they do get really aren't all that excited to be there.
Well, that to me sounds like hope, but I still wouldn't trust the bastards.
Not at all. So did you have some topics you wanted to bring up for today?
Well, it's interesting. I have dealt for 45 years with chronic pain as well as depression and anxiety. And I've always thought that depression was somewhat harder to treat than pain. And now I am convinced that severe anxiety is harder than both of them. I had two patients who come in for my intense program, 2 weeks each. And they are the most difficult people I've ever dealt with. It isn't that we can't help cut down on anxiety, but they seem to have an unlimited resource to create new anxiety no matter what you say. They are absolutely obsessed with it. It's interesting. However, I had a young man with severe anxiety, and in a week, he's turned around already. So it is possible. And of course, tonight at the Doubletree, I'm going to be talking about anxiety and how to control it.
You've sent out an email this morning, and if you're not subscribed to that, you can go to normshealy.com and just put in your email address and get on the list. It doesn't cost you anything. And I found today's rather interesting. You're talking about alternative methods of treatment. And I think we ought to dive into some of those because you listed therapies, but of course, in an email, you don't really have time to discuss that, especially for people that may not be aware of what that therapy involves. The top of the list is biogenics, retraining of the nervous system. Care to elaborate on that?
Yes. Back in the dark ages of 1972, I first learned about both biofeedback and autogenic training. Now, autogenic training has been around since 1912 as a self-regulatory system which works extremely well. Biofeedback was just beginning to be used, in that is, feeding back changes in circulation, muscle tension, EEG, any physiological thing you can measure can be fed back, and that can help train the brain to do it. So that's why I went back in 1974 to get my PhD in psychology, because I wanted to see what had gone on in the 100 years in between and even before with the idea of self-regulation. And I found many, many varieties of things in almost every society of using the mind to train the body and the mind and the emotions. And of course, it includes such things as Qigong, it includes such things as Tai Chi and yoga of all kinds. But what I learned is that there are certain things. Relaxation is important, and there's scores of ways of learning to relax. But you can prove the relaxation with certain mental approaches. For instance, it's important to learn to feel what's happening in your body. A lot of people block tension. They just get more agitated and more anxious and are ignoring the fact that the body is saying, help, help, help. And so one of the first things I teach is people to be able to shift their attention to feel what's happening in the left big toe or the right ear and everything in between, one thing at a time. And the more you learn to tune into what each part of the body is telling you in tension or no tension, the easier it is to gain mental control over it. I learned that people who have a problem actually get angry with the body. And of course, you can't afford the luxury of hating or disliking any part of your body. And so you have to learn to focus a feeling of love on it. I also began to realize that every cell in the body is actually pulsating every time your heart beats. And you can learn to control that. You can learn to feel the pulsation in your right big toe or your left ear or your nose, etc. The only place you don't feel it is inside your head. That could give you a headache. But every other place, you actually are gaining self-control by learning to differentiate where you focus your attention on getting the feedback from the body. And then you can breathe in and collect an unpleasant sensation. It's like you're using your breath as a gentle, loving vacuum cleaner. That's an American Indian technique for gaining control over the body. Or you can imagine breathing through the skin of an area, and if you do that for 20 minutes, you can make it numb. You can actually make it numb enough to undergo surgery. And so I focused on all of these techniques for gaining mental control over body functions. And no matter how much control you have, however, if you don't deal with your unfinished anger, guilt, anxiety, and depression, of course, the blocks come back. So we then go into a wide variety of guided imagery exercises of reliving, recreating old, unfinished business, anger, guilt, anxiety, depression, and mentally making a choice to take care of it, get rid of it. And we will continue after this.
And John Ray with Dr. Norman Shealy. We'll be back in a few minutes. This is John Regan at the controls today. And we were just talking about biogenics. And I wanted to ask, I was thinking back to, those younger days, high school, college, and a little bit thereafter, when we were partaking in physical activities, whether it's things like scouting or sports or military training, and you have something that gets overstressed or injured, and you can't just stop, so you almost concentrate practically on the task at hand, so that you rather ignore that pain signal. Does that relate to what you were talking about?
You bet. It is learning to focus what you allow into your consciousness and to control it. That's what's really fun, actually. I've found this so useful in my patients back in the early 70s that I've trained myself pretty well. The most important thing in general is not to allow yourself to obsess over something you can't change. If you can change it, change it. If you can't, detach. And over again, I emphasize the necessity to detach from those things which you absolutely cannot change.
Yeah, because otherwise you just over obsess and it never changes.
Exactly. I mean, it's like wallowing in manure. It doesn't get any better.
And I guess you say that's one of the reasons I left D.C.
Well, that's just one big cesspool, in my opinion. That has to be the most contaminated energy center in the world. I haven't been in Beijing, so I can't compare it with that. But other major cities around the world are much, much less toxic than D.C.
And, I guess I could say it was a pleasure leaving there.
Yes.
I was reading earlier on in your email talking about things like Dr. Royal Raymond Rife, as well as you talk about scalar therapy. And those were things I'd discovered years ago. And these were technologies from before World War II that the government pretty much took control of. The Tesla technology, the scalar technology, is energy that, we're used to electromagnetic, where it decreases with the square of the distance. With scalar, it doesn't do that, which, as nice as it is to get the free energy from what's going on around us, it's also be just as scary, because you can imagine, I guess you don't have to imagine too hard, if terrorist groups got nuclear weapons, how bad that would be.
Mm.
And scalar technology is even more powerful than that, and it can be done with technology that was off the shelf prior to World War II. So if they let that technology be out there where we could have the free energy, that also means the terrorist groups would have the technology for fantastic weapons. So I can at least understand a bit why they don't let that Tesla technology out of the bag, at least while they can. The Royal Raymond Rife technology, on the other hand, where basically everything has a vibration. And for those of us that are old enough, we remember the Memorex commercials. Is it live or is it Memorex? And they shatter a glass, from the opera singer. And, was it the opera singer or was it the Memorex cassette? And the idea is that when you have a harmonic resonance, it disrupts that, whether it's a glass or a pathogen, and causes it to go away. And that's think about what modern medicine would be like, if we were able to use that technology. However, I think about the weaponization of that, where you can do harmonizing frequencies to induce disease. And I guess we can get into that kind of discussion after this break. This is John Regan sitting in for Vincent for a few days as he gets things ready for winter. I took us on a nice side trip there. You can pretty much look at a lot of the articles that I post for when I'm on Mondays in the Spy Tech section. And what you'll see is I'll come across an article and this new technology that they're talking about, and the wonderful use that they have for it. And then I'll talk about, okay, let me put on my military hat. How do you weaponize this and use it against people? And that's what I find disturbing about a lot of the technology. And, given this government, if they haven't abused the technology yet, just give them some more time. So let me turn it back over to you, Dr. Shealy, and let you talk about Royal Raymond Rife and also scalar therapy, the way you want to address it.
Well, the holistic approach, and it's really interesting, John. When I introduced the concept of holistic medicine in 1978, it was a new concept, that instead of just treating an organ, you looked at the whole person, that is body, mind, and soul. And ever since we introduced that, the establishment, the leftistas of the establishment have been the same way they are in the current election. They have done everything they can to destroy the word. And they introduced complementary and alternative. And then they introduced the concept of integrative. Now, that is bastardization at its best. They have called integrative medicine and pretended that it's everything. Well, indeed, the average hospital has said they have an integrative medicine approach, and they might offer toe massage. I mean, it's that stupid. It's not comprehensive. It's not complete. It's anything but holistic. So we really need to look at the whole person, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual. And that includes such things as past life therapy, because there's no question that in many, almost every situation where there's a serious illness, it appears that there was unfinished business in a previous life. And often a single 1-hour past life therapy session can help a person come to grips with that in their current life. And then there's all kinds of electrical stimulation, which I introduced back in the 60s and have continued refining through the years with both stimulation of the spinal cord, stimulation of the skin, and now pulsed electromagnetic field therapy. And then going away from electricity to using essential oil blends to stimulate acupuncture points. Acupuncture has many benefits, but it requires going to the doctor's office or the acupuncturist office to have it done once a week. Well, transcutaneously, you could do it at home. And although I still do not truly understand the concept of scalar therapy, the evidence is increasing that scalar, which is a very high frequency, in other words, scalar energy exceeds the speed of light. I guess that's the closest I can come to describing it. And I'm doing an experiment right now on myself to see whether getting 7 scalar treatments will increase my CD34 cells. CD34 are cells you can measure in the blood that are a great reflection of stem cell activity. And of course, we know that if you could just mobilize your stem cells, they can do anything. They can repair anything in the body. So in another 10 days or so, I should have the results of whether scalar therapy mobilizes stem cells. If it does, that'll be the simplest, safest, fastest way to get regeneration within the body. And of course, we include all kinds of body things, including massage. And for some people with more serious illnesses, large doses of vitamin C, up to 100 grams a day, can be helpful in reversing all kinds of chronic illness. And then, of course, food and nutrition and supplements. I just saw a patient whose physician forbade her from taking any supplements while he was managing her. Well, that means to me I'd fire him before he got started. And then physical exercise. So the holistic approach looks at the whole situation, top to bottom and beyond, into the soul or spirit level.
You know, I was a patient of Dr. Jerry Tennant here in Dallas before moving to the Ozarks. And when I went to see him, he gave me a small booklet talking about how the body works. And one of the parts of that, he talked about a couple of the brain chemicals. I believe serotonin was one. I think norepinephrine was another. And he listed there's 6 vitamins and minerals that are required for each one of those. And it's like 5 of them are in common. And if you're deficient in any one of those, your body does the best it can, but it can't really produce things the way it's supposed to. And if you're deficient in, these chemicals, it's kind of like naturally you're going to have problems like depression and other things. So nutrition is such an important part of keeping the body running the way it's supposed to.
Yes, no question about it. In today's world, John, actually, I believe that the average person needs about 20 times minimum the so-called daily requirement or minimum daily requirement of all the basic essential vitamins. The stress level from toxins in the air has increased our need for B1, B2, B3, B6, etc.
And when you look up the nutritional value of a food product, oftentimes that was research done back in the 50s. And what's in the food nowadays often doesn't match that. So it just, again, reinforces the need for supplementation.
Exactly.
Another one you have on the list is sound and music therapy.
Yes. Well, we've known for centuries that music can calm people down. And so way back again in the early 70s when I started, I always used calming music. But then in 75, I got introduced to Bob Monroe's work with Hemisync. Hemisync is very interesting. Basically, you could put into one ear, let's say, 108 pulses per second, and the opposite ear, just 100 pulses per second. And you only hear that difference between the two, but it does induce a state of extreme deep relaxation. And so by altering the way sound is applied, we can certainly enhance or increase the relaxation response, which is ideal for healing. And then now we have learned that there are other frequencies, the so-called gamma frequencies, which is 32 to 100 cycles per second. And that gives you another different physiological, psychological effect of, manipulating sound in a healthy way.
And again, we've seen where this has been misused by the government and mind control and by corporations in trying to induce you to buy things. Even our television sets, the combination of the video and the sound puts you into an alternate state where your cognitive reasoning's been shut down. And certainly we know certain sounds will just put you on edge practically immediately. And other sounds, in fact, the military has been known to use large speakers and blast a facility just trying to, disturb the people, make it where they can't sleep. And let's say, unfortunately, it's part of warfare. But again, there is a good side of it, which can be used to, like you say, help you relax and, put you into a better frame.
Well, let's face it. The basic cause of disease of all kinds is stress. And that stress can be psychological or physical. It can be nuclear. It can be temperature. It can be physical. I mean, stress, more than the body is comfortable handling. But the greatest stress is psychological, emotional, angst, if you will, anxiety. And it causes more disease than everything else combined.
And sometimes that flies under the radar, too. I remember when I was there in Springfield, our pet lady, she looked like a dog and acted like a cat. Was 15 years old, and it was getting to be that time where, needed to put her down. And there's a certain stress associated with that. And I didn't realize how much stress that really was until after we had put her down and that decision was no longer a decision that had to be made. And I think we can get to that situation in other events in our lives. We don't realize the stress that we're feeling, even though we understand that there's a little bit of stress involved with what we have to do. And I guess that gets back to your point. Some of these therapies are there to relieve stress, whether you know about it or not.
Exactly.
It's John Regan with Dr. Norm Shealy. We'll be back after this commercial break. This is John Regan with Dr. Norm Shealy. We've been talking about the email he sent out this morning. And in the list of therapies, you have physical fitness. And, I think if all of us lived an Amish-type lifestyle, this wouldn't even have to be on your list. But the lifestyle that most of us live, that we need to do more. And then you've got people, and I'm included in that, where you've got an injury, whether it's bad back, bad knees, that, if you try to do something, the pain gets to be such that you can't. What types of activities can you recommend for people that has a limitation like, back or knee?
Actually, if you can have access to a swimming pool, just walk into it, if you will, climb into it, do it, whatever you can, and just walk in the swimming pool. It is fantastic exercise. I don't think you and I have ever discussed one of my favorite things, but I don't really enjoy jogging. But I have a 5-foot deep hot tub, and I can climb into that. I have to get steps to get up to get in it. And then I can jog like 100 miles an hour with no discomfort whatsoever. And it's so much easier and more fun than trying to jog on land. So it's one of my most favorite activities. My average morning is 90 minutes of exercise. The last 20 minutes of jogging in the hot tub.
What kind of activities could you recommend for the wintertime when, we do have access to a saltwater pool, but, it's not open 12 months a year?
Well, there are numerous limbering exercises. There are numerous activities which you can do lying on the floor, standing, sitting, just optimal movement in all directions. It is, again, I spend an hour doing what I would call vigorous limbering. When I say vigorous, what I do is I not only, push myself as far as I can go with every single muscle tension in the world, but I resist it with my arm on the other side. So it's sort of like the old Charles Atlas dynamic tension exercise. That is the foundation for my whole exercise program. Is 60 minutes of dynamic tension limbering. It's a wonderful book called The Anatomy of Stretching by Brad Walker. And I use that a lot with my patients to have them get into the habit of just wonderful, wonderful limbering.
From what I understand, it's very important to stretch anyway, just to, maintain your body and your range of motion, and otherwise, so much
absolutely.
of it's use it or lose it is how it goes.
Critical. I do consider this one of the most important exercises of all, and I've done this for years. I can't imagine sitting all day without doing that kind of exercise. It's just, to me, critical.
Well, let's see. I'm not sure we can do anything justice with the time we have left this hour. Let me just update people. If you haven't heard me recently, I've got a new website in addition to the Financial State of the Union. It's eze33.org, short for Ezekiel 33. And you can get to my book website from there without having to type that whole long URL. It's John Ray with Dr. Norm Shealy. We'll be back after the top of the hour break. In case you missed the first hour, this is John Regan sitting in for Vincent today. He's having to get ready for winter, and we'll be back in just a few days. In the meantime, I'm helping him out. If you'd like to join in on the fun and have questions for Dr. Shealy, that number is 1-866-582-9933, 1-866-582-9933. And we've been talking about the email that Dr. Shealy sent out this morning. And you can get on that list by going to normshealy.com. And there's a place for you to enter your email address. And it's definitely a good resource to collect. And doesn't cost you a thing but your time. And why don't we take up with the TENS therapy? I guess there's nobody more qualified to talk about that than you.
Well, the important thing, John, is that people must take personal responsibility. I can't do anything. I can teach. I can show. But I can't actually think for people. Interestingly, I saw a man yesterday that I originally saw several weeks ago, and I gave him a free download of my autogenic training thing. And he's supposed to do it twice a day. Well, he came back yesterday, and he admitted he'd only done it once in 3 weeks. He got bored, he said. So you'd rather focus on your pain than on getting rid of your pain, is my response. I mean, it's interesting. Some people are just as lazy in doing things mentally as they are physical.
And I think we can translate that into other areas as well.
Oh, yeah.
We talk about preparedness. It's what we're here for. USA Prepares. And it takes more than just the knowledge. You have to develop skills. You have to, get these tools. You have to get the experience. And, just sitting here reading and talking about, that's good, but it's got to go further than that.
Yes. One of my other favorites is to have people just stand up and bend their knees up and down, and then they can start moving their arms up and down. I call it bouncing in place. And there's a YouTube on that, Bounce with Dr. Shealy. And, it's like any movement is better than no movement, or halitosis is better than no breath at all.
Like many people, I've been in therapy and had a TENS unit used on me. Could you explain how that works?
How autogenic training works?
How TENS?
Oh, TENS. All right, well, transcutaneous electrical nerve stimulation, that goes back to the mid-'60s. My work in the lab in physiology showed that electricity could inhibit pain. So a low level of electricity, which is not painful at all, just sort of a tingle, can truly reduce pain. Actually, one of the first experiments I did on it was in women in labor. And we were able to reduce the need for any kind of pain-reducing medication right up to the delivery itself by using electrical stimulation on the skin of the back and buttocks area to reduce the pain of labor. Did 75 patients with that without a single one having to have any medication for the pain of labor, which is a pretty intense pain. And now, in general, you put an electrode. I start testing using just plain old sponge electrodes, which can be wet because you can move them around. You put one above and one below, not directly over the pain, but above and below the pain, or on either side of the pain if you can. And placing that and turning up the electricity slowly until they feel a buzz. And I always turn it up to it's just uncomfortable and then down just below discomfort, so it's not at all uncomfortable. And that is excellent for pain that is fairly focal or localized. It's hard to do the whole leg, although actually way back when I was doing my original work with this, in a patient who was too sick for anesthesia, I actually was able to apply the electricity in such a way, and he needed amputation because of gangrene in the foot. They were actually able to amputate his foot without any anesthesia using electrical stimulation on the skin. So it's a tremendous tool for relieving pain. But interestingly, pulsed electromagnetic field therapy is also superb. Now there, you're not putting it directly on the skin. You're sort of bathing the body as a whole in an electric field. And that increases circulation, but also can relieve pain.
It amazes me what I've learned about the medical field as an outsider, how, Rockefeller and others donated lots of money to the medical schools. And that's where they started teaching, everything's, medicine and surgery. In
other words, the beginning of the pharmacomafia.
Exactly. And it gets me, again, as an outsider, how they ignore the electrical nature of the body. And it's not just medicine. We all see this in other areas as well. There's the electrical nature of the universe that is being ignored by mainstream science as well. And then unfortunately, they're finding their gravity-only models aren't working. So we're actually seeing some change in that. And I also believe we're seeing some change in the medical field. But it gets me how doctors will work with, EKGs and EEGs, which, the first part of that is electro, and they don't think about how electricity is being used in the body and how when that's not flowing right and when you don't have the right levels of energy, how that affects wellness. And, it's kind of frustrating, especially seeing the direction our government is trying to take us. When you add in, you've got the insurance companies that only authorize certain types of treatment, and we're getting ready to have the AIs, artificial intelligences, take over for doctors in doing the diagnosis and treatment. And you're not going to have the option to say, I want something else. And when you throw the Internet of Things on top of that, where they do the monitoring of everything, if you're not taking your drug, you're going to get a visit from the government. Now, we're not there yet, but, depending on how this election goes, we could get there a lot sooner than people might think.
Yes, and with medical care, we're darn near there already with Obamacare. I mean, I guess you've seen even the media is reporting the marked increases in medical insurance premiums this year because of Obamacare.
Now, I covered that one of the articles where, the person's monthly premiums went from, the $700 range a month, which was already outrageous, to $1,600 a month. And they compared that to if you were getting a mortgage on a house right now, $1,600 a month is what the payment would be for a $400,000 house. It's just simply outrageous. And then even when you have the insurance, that doesn't translate into being able to use it. They've now have the deductibles so high that if you have any money left over, you're lucky to be able to make up the deductible. And then they've also increased the copays as well. So it's really a great scam if you can get it. Collect lots of money and then make it to where people can't afford to use it.
Well, apparently a great deal of the increase is going to be paid by the government. In other words, taxes are going to go up universally just because of Obamacare.
I hate to tell them, but there's really not anything left to tax.
Well, I don't know if you've heard, the Missouri legislature is apparently in the process of deciding whether to tax services, not just goods and sales, but services. That would increase the cost of living for the state of Missouri about 10%. And fortunately, there is an amendment that has been gotten up by the public to prevent the legislature from being able to add that kind of tax.
Yeah, well, the people in government I know think that there's always more taxpayer money where that came from. And it's it's just not true. And I'm seeing well, one of the things we're seeing right now is the pension funds are popping, and the only choice is to cut the pension benefits or raise taxes. And again, nobody has the money to raise taxes with. It's John Regan with Dr. Norm Shealy. We'll be back after these few messages. This is John Regan with Dr. Norm Shealy, and we have a call. George from New Hampshire. George, welcome to USA Prepares.
Yes, hi, Dr. Shealy, and hello, Captain John. I just like to...
I'm not hearing him, John.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can you hear me?
That's
now,
better.
Dr.
Yes,
Shealy?
thank you.
I'm sorry. This is a phone. Dr. Shealy, I have a question for you, and I want you to know I have nothing but the utmost respect for you, and I know you're a seeker of wisdom and truth, and I know that you bring so much of medical research and experience from your 65 plus years in medicine. I'm not trying to say that as I'm not saying that in a disregard, but I remember you said 1960 you were at the Massachusetts General, and I did the arithmetic, but I couldn't tell from your voice. But anyway, I like the track you're going on, because I know you're trying to tell us ways that even though we spend more money in this country on medical care, we rank 50th in the world. And I know you're trying to show us ways that there are other ways that work better than a lot of things that are accepted and very profitable, but not necessarily to the patients. And not to go on, there's just one thing that I just want to make a proposal to you in this sense. I think that in your investigations, I think you're honestly reporting what you're encountering with these people who've had trauma in a past life that carries over into the current life. And I just wanted to say that I've studied it, not perhaps as much as you, but I would say this is I think that there are certain diseases, as you'll agree, that are passed down in families a lot of times, certain types of cancers and other things. And I know that in the Bible they were warned about the worm that dieth not. A worm will go from one fruit, eat it from the inside out, and move on to the next. I think what you're encountering in these past life progressions under hypnosis is I think there are entities that have been around for maybe thousands of years, and they go from person to person, almost the way an actor will inhabit a character. They inhabit human beings, and they misappropriate the body, and what they do is they do so much damage, and then they try before their host is about to die, I think through cruelty, through trauma, pressure, they'll try to transfer themselves into the next generation or some person who's vulnerable. And I'm wondering if it might be possible, what you think is that perhaps what you're encountering are these entities that, as the expression says, what got into you?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, actually. There's a wonderful book written, about 25 years ago called Healing the Family Tree. A British physician stated that 2/3 of his patients were possessed by disincarnated ex-family members or former family members. And he worked with an Anglican priest to actually get rid of that. In general, I think that there's some of that passed down just through the environment and personalities that keep going, bringing along the same stuff. And of course, there's also changes to the genes themselves. Now, some people believe that up to 25% of all major illnesses are the result of genetic influences that are direct chemical changes in the DNA of the body. All of these things are part of the whole. And so the most important thing is if a person is infiltrated, if you will, by negative thoughts, to some extent, it may not matter whether it was that individual's negative thought from a previous life or something they've inherited from the family, so to speak. So I believe that both are possible, and there's some genetic changes. On the other hand, we now know that most genetic things can be influenced. In other words, if you've got good health habits, those possible negative gene things don't show up. It's called epigenetics.
Well, like you said, Dr. Shealy, though, and I think John would agree, perhaps, that holistically speaking, you have to treat the whole person.
Yeah.
An aspect of the symptom.
Thank you for bringing that up again. That is the whole picture.
Okay, great. Thank you, Dr. Shealy. It's nice having you, John. Take care.
Thanks for the call, George. This is John Ray with Dr. Norm Shealy. We'll be back in a few minutes. This is John Ray with Dr. Norm Shealy. And, I feel like we just had one of those third rail episodes. And, I have spent a lot of time in the Baptist church, and most of those congregations, I would say, suffer from hardening of the attitude. And I'm not one that just goes out to try to disrupt, but I do read my Bible, and I'm looking and I see how many doctrines are based off cherry picking. And, it does say we're supposed to rightfully divide the scripture, but I don't think it's rightfully dividing when you just choose which passages you want to prove your doctrine. And, it's not like it's a new thing. It's the same thing 2,000 years ago. And when you jump into the spiritual side of things, and there even talks in the New Testament, not to believe every spirit, but to test the spirit to see if they were of God. So to me, that says even then, there is spiritual communication. And it gets so tough because when you're working on the spiritual side of things, all you really have is the testimony of the people that are in the alleged communication. And that ranges from everything from real experiences to, charlatans that are trying to manipulate people. So it's very, very tough when we try to cover those types of things objectively. But one thing that I do want to get into, and you talked about this as well, the Bible talks about, there's actions you take and there's ramifications for a few generations down the road. And what we know now, that describes epigenetics. What happens, the experience you have affects the expression of your DNA, and that affects your offspring and can affect their offspring for, like I say, a few generations. Dr. Shealy?
In fact, interestingly, taking that down to the nutritional load, back in the 40s, Price and Pottinger, a physician and dentist working together, demonstrated in cats that nutritional deficiencies were carried at least 4 generations forward, causing physical abnormalities in the kittens 4 generations later.
And I've read articles about how, when, a woman, especially dealing with things like reproductive health and well, even general health, it's not just her mother you look at. You have to look to her grandmother as well, because the woman is born with her lifetime egg supply. So if the grandmother suffered nutritional problems like during the Great Depression before the daughter was born, then that daughter has certain things that can adversely affect the granddaughter.
Absolutely, unequivocal, John. I mean, it doesn't end with one generation for sure. That is one of the greatest truths of all time.
And during the break, I was looking at some of the articles I'd saved up for the next time I was on with you, and I guess it's been a while because this article was dated June 12th. The title is "Just a Single Prescription of Antibiotics Can Disrupt Brain Cell Communication and Lead to a Higher Risk of Depression."
And that is another truth, of course, because it clobbers the healthy bacteria in our intestines. I mean, our body has more bacteria in it than it does cells, many times the number of cells of healthy bacteria. And antibiotics kill those healthy bacteria and or make them mutate into unhealthy bacteria or both. And so, yes, there are times when antibiotics are needed to save your life, but they're rare.
Sometimes I wish I had a time machine that could go back and tell my mother to do some things differently. And now here we're talking about, I was born in 1957, and the people were indoctrinated at that time, don't breastfeed, do formula. So, that's what I was fed, which I think, it was detrimental to my immune system. And, even as a baby, she told me about times I was taken to the hospital and had multiple injections, probably penicillin at the time. And I even remember as a young child, still going to the pediatrician. There was one point where I was having dry heaves because, so much of my, bacteria, the good stuff, had been taken out, and, have me drink buttermilk to replace some of that. But when you go in there and you clobber, that whole flora that's in your gut, you don't just replace it. You can go out and get probiotics, but that's just a fraction of what you were supposed to have been born with. And it's such a big part of the immune system. And I think they're probably doing it on purpose. If not, I guess to be fortunate, it's only greed. But they are making people sicker just with these antibiotics.
Yes. Well, as you know, I think that there are uses for drugs in acute illnesses and rarely good uses of drugs in chronic illnesses. And that includes almost every chronic disease. That is the whole reason that the holistic movement was created back in the 70s, that conventional medicine really is not good. In fact, it may be more harmful than useful in chronic illness.
I was president of the Holistic Chamber of Commerce here in Dallas for a couple of years before moving to the Ozarks. So I was fortunate to meet a lot of doctors that have similar beliefs, and even a vet, getting into holistic veterinary, because it's like with vaccinations, you can over-vaccinate your pet too, and they don't really need these every year. And unfortunately, some communities require it, and there are tests that can be run to tell, like, whether or not it's time to give another rabies shot to keep the immunity up. But it's nice when you get the chance to hang around, those times of medical professionals that, don't go for the medicine first. And, that makes it difficult market-wise. Yes, there's times that you really would like to have that medicine to treat something, but all too often what they do is go in, they'll get your symptoms, and, first thing they do is prescribe a drug. It's not about getting down to the root cause. But again, with this insurance scheme that we have going, a doctor really can't sit down and take the time. Because to me, if somebody comes in with symptoms of depression, I think the first discussion they ought to have is, what's your diet? Because with this, American diet that we have, quite often you're going to be deficient in, one or more of, the vitamins or minerals you need for, making those brain chemicals. And, why don't we try supplementation first before putting somebody on, especially these, fluoride-based antidepressants that cause people to be suicidal or homicidal?
Yes. Well, actually, with every new patient, I have them fill out 9 pages of questions even before I see them, because that saves me at least another half hour. And I spend a full hour with a new patient, plus those 9 pages of questions that help me get a broader picture of what's going on in the individual. And then one of the first things I often ask is, well, give me your average breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Yeah, if we only had where other doctors did it that way. Well, probably a good topic now, too, is we're getting ready to go off daylight savings time, and that has an effect on the body as well. So there, at least, when you fall back, it's not as bad as when you lose the hour in the spring. But is there anything you might recommend for us to get ready for the time change?
Well, I always set my clock at 6 o'clock in the evening instead of 2 a.m. in the morning. So, but I take advantage of that and still go to bed an hour earlier than I would. In other words, I usually go to bed at 9 o'clock and get up at 5. But on that night, I'll set the clock back and go to bed at the new 8 o'clock that first night. That's just the way I handle it, and that does well for me.
Okay. And let's see. I was also looking at an article that talked about some of the things that they are including in vaccines. And
which poison are you talking about?
Well, I'll get into that when we get back from the break. Shealy, we were getting ready to talk about this article I found about 7 mind-blowing ingredients that are in vaccines. I'll read through the list, and then you can pick and choose which ones you want to talk about. Monkey kidney cells, which are found in DTaP and polio vaccines. Latex found in Hep B vaccines. Mycoplasma. Artificial sweeteners. That doesn't even make sense. Why do you need an artificial sweetener in something that is not even oral? Ammonium sulfate, MSG, again, that's bad enough to take orally, much less have injected into, directly into your bloodstream. And peanut oil, which, kind of makes you wonder, because back when I was going to public school, almost nobody had a peanut allergy. And now with all the increased numbers of vaccines, including those that are cultured in peanut oil, all of a sudden we've got lots of people with peanut allergies. Dr. Shealy?
Well, flip a coin because they all sound unpalatable and insane. I mean, I can't imagine any reason for any one of those things needing to be in a vaccine. And you didn't mention, of course, mercury and aluminum, which also are common.
Yeah, these were just the ingredients you probably hadn't heard about.
Right.
I guess while we're on the topic of vaccines, a lot of cases you don't have a choice, but I'm sure there's some vaccines, just like some medicines, that make sense to take. And in your opinion, what would those be?
Well, I just think the old-fashioned DPT, diphtheria, pertussis, tetanus, should be given in life, and I think polio should be given. Those we know have worked well for many, many decades. Personally, once you're grown, unless you're exposed to skin trauma on a farm, I don't think you need a renewal of your tetanus. And I do not take flu shot, have not taken the shingle shot, have not taken the pneumonia shot, and don't plan on taking them. So I think some basic children's vaccines are good, and beyond that, I think keep your immune system healthy. Now, I do want to mention that the discussion we've had about some of the things I've recommended are in my latest book, Blueprint for Holistic Healing, and I have published there my protocols, my recommendations for more illnesses than I ever have published in anything before, so you can find out some of the true holistic approaches that are substitutes or preferred alternatives to drugs for most things right there.
And where can we find that book?
Well, it's at Amazon, of course, and it's on my website.
Okay. Well, we've got about a minute left. Where would you like to close us out with today?
Well, I would say the single most important thing always is, remember, every thought is a prayer. Everything you say, do, think is really your mind personality communicating to the whole you. And it's time to stop and listen to your higher self or your soul. That's the thing you should communicate with every day of your life.
Yeah, I think that gets into, what you devote your time to is what you're worshiping.
Exactly.
And may not be exactly what is beneficial.
Exactly. And in communicating with soul and God is the ultimate essential.
Well, Dr. Shealy, I enjoyed being with you again.
As always, John, thank you.
Thank you. Remember, class, honesty and integrity. What happens next is up to you.